Late night on the Margrave Train. Attention passengers, this train has temporarily paused. Please remain seated and keep your belongings close. Further updates will follow from the conductor. Thank you. The voice clicked off. The four passengers in the train, myself included, stared at each other incredulously. The man with black hair and thin frame glasses stood, annoyance painted on his face. "What the fuck?" he asked no one in particular. The woman dressed in a formal business suit said nothing. She was mumbling to herself and typing on her phone. I fumbled for my phone, scrolling through my contact list to call my mother that I would be late for dinner. The phone rang and rang. No response. My brows furrowed and I pocketed the phone. Mum always answered on the first ring. "Let's remain seated. I'm sure everything will be all right," I uninterestedly mumbled. The man with glasses threw a look of disdain at us who were seated. "I'm going to find the conductor," he threw over his shoulder and walked off. I rolled my eyes. Last thing I needed was to be stranded here with an asshole with 4 eyes. I had to get to Stavenport. Fast. Sighing, I turned to the window, realizing that we were in the tunnel that linked Haven Grove to Stavenport town. This tunnel ran for miles, and after it was a dense forest before Stavenport, where my apartment cozily resided in the suburbs. Our train stopping here, in the middle of nowhere, wasn't really the best circumstance. "You know the story about this tunnel?" the gruff-voiced man piped from his corner. His lighter clicked unsuccessfully, and a cigarette dangled from his lips. I acted like I didn't hear him. The light overhead flickered ominously, periodically bathing us in darkness. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat and prayed for the train to get moving. I'd heard of muggings on trains, and this spot was giving me a weird vibe. Besides, where was the conductor? Surely we would have heard him crunching on the gravel, checking for faults in the train. We'd been here for maybe 30 minutes now. Again, my eyes scanned outside, and I saw no one. Unease blossomed in my stomach. An old tale talks of body snatchers residing in the damp and dark places. People with friendly faces but sinister intentions. Some say the souls of people who've died by the train tracks wander at night, waiting to take another soul to hell with them. The man rasped, finally lighting the cigarette and pocketing his damn lighter. Body snatchers? Really? What was this? A campfire story? I rolled my eyes but maintained my silence. Nothing but creeps and weirdos on trains. "Night trains must pay a price to pass," the woman whispered. I turned to look at her when the man with glasses returned, eyes flashing with annoyance. "The conductor isn't there. There's no one in the driver compartment," he angrily spat. I sat upright. "What?" "I even checked round the train. There's no one around. Looks like the conductor bailed on us while we were seated." He threw this jab at me. I glared at him. "A conductor can't leave a train in the middle of nowhere." I spat. "We have to leave before something bad happens," the woman whimpered. I sighed in exasperation. "I'm not leaving. The conductor is going to come back and this train is going to move." "Well, I'm leaving." The man with the cigarette stood and moved past us. He walked to the conductor's seat, pressed a button, and the train door opened. Hurriedly, he glanced left and right before hopping off and briskly walking away. "Hey," I called out to the cigarette guy. He didn't stop walking. The glasses guy stared at me, and the woman, who was now quivering, sweat beading on her brow. "Hey, call 911!" he barked at the woman. She made no indication that she'd heard him, violently shaking her leg. I patted my pocket to retrieve my phone. I felt nothing. My phone was suddenly not there. "What the?" I mumbled, standing up to crouch under the chair in case it had fallen out. There was nothing on the floor. It seemed like my phone had never existed in the first place. "Hey, I'm talking to you." He moved towards the woman. "I can't find my phone." I found myself saying as I straightened. I glared at the 2 people left. One of them must have stolen it, or the man that got down from the train had snatched it before he disappeared. My stomach tightened and my heart quickened. "Look, this isn't funny," I began, moving towards the woman and the glasses guy. I was already pissed. The glasses guy moved behind the woman and his eyes widened. "Oh my fucking God," he screamed, backing away. I stopped in my tracks. What the hell was going on? The light flickered again, and cold tunnel air stung my face through the open train door. Suddenly calm, The woman stood to her full height and tossed her phone out the open window beside her. A dull clatter sounded few seconds later. "Oops," she said. The guy with the glasses kept on moving backwards, his eyes pinned on something I couldn't see. "Time up," she said, and the air in the train stilled. I looked at the woman, and a sudden coldness seeped into my bones. The woman was stiff, and the man was hyperventilating, still fixated on something I couldn't see. I was trying to piece the chaos that was unfolding when her eyes suddenly started to bleed. Black liquid flowed down her face to her arms, and her hands elongated to claws sharp and pointed. "You should have left," she said, moving towards the guy. He backed away, looking wildly for help. As she turned, I finally saw what the guy had seen. It was enough to tear a gasp from my lips. The back of her head was bloody, like someone had clubbed her on the head. Brain matter dribbled down her black suit. How was she still alive with an injury like that? She'd looked fine all these while. My eyes caught two approaching figures through the glass window, a tall man dragging a limp-looking woman. Everything seemed to be happening too fast, and my brain refused to function. The mumbling woman gave a maniac laugh and lunged for the guy with glasses. He tripped over his feet and fell, and she went down with him, scratching at his face with impossibly long nails, all the while laughing. Blood splattered, and the guy gurgled a scream. Stunned and horrified, I stared at the scene, watching as she twisted her elongated claws into his neck. Blood splurged. The guy's eyes widened, mouth agape, but no sound coming out of it. The woman's back cracked as her suit shredded as her body impossibly increased in length. A shriek rose from her throat, bird-like in its intensity. I didn't register I was screaming until my back hit the iron bar behind me. I saw her bend her head to drink the blood spurting from the guy's neck. Hot bile rose in my throat, and I grabbed the metal railing to steady myself. I glanced at the door, ready to bolt. The maniac woman paused, her neck giving a sharp, sickening snap as it turned 180 degrees. Blood pounded into my ears as sinister black eyes stared straight at me. "Run and you die," she growled. The light flickered once, twice, and went off. Darkness swallowed us up. My brain finally kicked into motion as I was robbed of my sense of sight. I dove in the direction of the open door. I was too slow. The woman knocked me back, moving faster than I'd anticipated. I crashed into the metal rail, my rib giving a sickening crack. Pain blossomed in my right side, and I stifled a scream. Panic tightened my throat, and I gasped for breath, my heart pounding as though it would burst. I felt her clambering over me, and I kicked out desperately. She seized my leg in midair and sank her claws into my thigh. Before I could scream, she was pressing my neck down into the grimy floor, her hot, metallic breath by my ear. Something sharp grazed my jugular vein, and I struggled, internally weighing which was more important, screaming or struggling. I was like a fly pinned to a board. Fear crawled up my throat. I was going to die, just like that guy in glasses. Something clanged in the darkness like metal connecting with flesh, and the woman above me fell sideways, plopping beside me, suddenly silent. Liquid splattered on my face, and I suspected it was blood. Horrified, but finally free, I scrambled to my feet and rushed out of the train, running and tripping on my feet. My nerves were on fire, and if I stopped running, I knew I would die. Something had gotten the woman, and I feared it would come for me too. The headlights of the train went out, suddenly encasing me in darkness. The tunnel stank. It was damp, dirty, and eerily silent. Not even rats chittered. Only my sneakers squeaked noisily, amplified by the silence. I tried to shake the feeling that something was watching me, but unease coiled round my body. I was waiting for something to tackle me from behind. My eyes strained to adjust to the darkness as I stumbled in gravel and dirt. This was the middle of nowhere. Even though I'd managed to get out of the tunnel, I had to navigate a forest I'd only glimpsed through train windows. Desperately, I looked around, seeing nothing but trees. How far could that cigarette guy have gotten? Had something happened to him too? My thigh began to burn, reminding me that it was injured. I glanced behind me, breathing heavily, and I could barely make out the train anymore from the end of the tunnel. When I turned my head, I came face to face with another terror. I screamed in fright, falling on my back as I tried to scramble away. It was the tall, bloodied man from earlier. How had he caught up to me so quickly? There'd been no one behind me. The man offered his hand. "Are you okay? You look quite scared." I scrambled to my feet, moving backwards. He looked normal, except for the blood soaking the front of his shirt. Concern was plastered on his face. I looked around for the woman he'd been dragging earlier, but I didn't find her. "I'm not going to hurt you. I was attacked, too." I stared at him disbelievingly. How convenient. My car was stolen by this crazy person dressed like a train driver, leaving me stranded. The man rattled on, inching closer. "Where?" I suspiciously asked, getting the courage to stand on my feet with my hands by my side and my feet poised to run. The man laughed a bit, waving his hands. "How would I know? Along the forest road, I guess? Look, I'm just trying to find a way out of here, and from the looks of it, it seems you are too, and that leg seems bad," he said, pointing to my thigh, and like magic, the pain revisited me, reminding me of how bad it actually was. Blood oozed from the cut. "Have you called for help? It's too dark out here for me to see," he asked, and I looked at him mute. He seemed to realize I hadn't. "I would call the police, but—" He fished out a phone. "There's no signal. I hate to say it, but we're going to hike it to town. There's one just after this forest," he calmly said, pocketing the phone quickly. I saw the blank screen few seconds before it entered his pocket. My eyes narrowed. "I don't trust you," I bluntly said, eyeing him. The man threw up his hands in surrender, amusement shining in his gray eyes. "I can't say I blame you. Is it the bloody shirt? I promise it's not what it looks like. Come on, I know a shortcut," he said so cheerily, and my eyes narrowed some more as I stayed where I was. "Why don't I hang on to that phone? I can send someone a message to come get us, and whenever a signal comes in, it will deliver." "How about that?" I suggested. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, but he fished out the phone with a shrug and stretched it out to me. I couldn't help but glance behind me again. Where was the woman he'd been holding? He was closer when my eyes pinned themselves on him. Alarmed at the proximity, I moved backwards but stumbled. I saw the exact moment the phone fell from his hands and his foot came down hard on the screen as he moved to catch me. My fingers closed around a rock, and I righted myself quickly, slapping his hands off me. I stared at the cracked phone, crushed beyond repair. My guess was right. He would never give me the phone because he never checked if it had a signal. The conclusion my brain arrived at set my heart pounding again. He was either a body snatcher, a psycho killer like the woman on the train, or a pathological liar. "Why did you do that?" I shouted, breathing heavily. Mock surprise was plastered on his face, instantly making me angry but cautious. This man was crazy. "It was an accident. Didn't you see I was trying to catch you?" My eyes hardened. "You intentionally broke that phone and you never even checked for a signal," I accused. The man stared at me for a full second like I was crazy. Had I accused him wrongly? Was he actually a good guy? My uncertainty battled with my reasoning, and the air was quiet as my body registered something was amiss. My breathing had unconsciously changed, and the pain I felt in my leg seemed to have tripled. What if I hadn't seen him do that? What if I was seeing things due to blood loss? "You sound a bit crazy now," he calmly said. I shook my head, trying to get some bearing. "I wasn't crazy. I wasn't crazy." "Where's the lady you were holding earlier?" I asked, trying to gain control over the situation. It took a minute before the man registered my question, his gaze lifting from the open flesh in my thigh. His hands covered his face as his shoulders began to shake uncontrollably. Was he crying? I moved back some more. His sudden display of emotion struck me as odd. The air seemed to get colder and my fingers felt like ice. She was my wife. She was badly hurt, and he peeked through his fingers like a child. Like the woman on the train. He gave a maniac chuckle, which matured into full-blown laughter as my expression morphed into fear, and the distance increased between us. His hands dropped, and I gasped in horror as gray eyes morphed into black liquid that flowed from his eyes down his face. His lips curved into a sinister, open-toothed smile, showcasing rows and rows of razor-sharp teeth. "I killed her." My eyes fell on the blood stain on his shirt, and it suddenly made sense. My heart thudded hard in my chest, my legs shook. He cracked his neck, bones popping uncannily. I backed away, glancing wildly for some sort of escape. When he looked at me, I knew I was staring into the eyes of another evil. This time, I wasn't sure I would come out alive. He slowly approached me, sinister smile intact. "It's nothing personal, Maisie. I just want to be free," he shrugged. My eyes were wider than saucers, and a migraine began to form somewhere in my head. I clutched the rock behind me like a savior. He knew my name? "You're crazy," I whispered. He smiled even wider. "So are you, Maisie." Something tugged at my memory. I struggled to get my breathing under control. The breeze flitting around me picked up the pace, and I swore I heard voices in it. The man loomed closer. Black veins were stark against his chalk-white skin, and his teeth clacked together when he spoke, a haunting sound that tore at my sanity. "This wasn't real. This isn't real, Maisie. Just close your eyes and it'll be over," I heard him say. His words plucked at a buried memory within me. My migraine intensified, and the voices in the wind sounded fiercer. "Close your eyes and it will be over soon. She has blackouts. Can't remember her own name sometimes. Let's keep her at St. N's Good Hospital." Memories tore at me. My head felt as though it would burst. "No," I whispered. I shook my head while my feet brushed grass the more I moved backwards. He was forcing me into the forest where it was darker than I expected. The only thing I could see were his canines, and they were unnaturally long, dripping with saliva. My back hit a tree trunk. "All I have to do is send 3 souls to hell," he whispered, closing in on me, hunger shining in his empty eyes. "Why are you doing this?" I mumbled. "For freedom," he repeated. "Freedom? Freedom from what? This couldn't be real. Some say the souls of people who've died by the train tracks wander at night, waiting to take another soul to hell with them. It was a bad moment to remember what that cigarette guy had said, but it suddenly made sense. The woman on the train seemed to have an injury that would have killed anyone in minutes, and she'd killed the guy with glasses and almost me. "I killed your conductor and that limping woman. I didn't want to, but I had to. I have to kill to be free," he snarled, and my breathing quickened. My eyes scanned my surroundings to piece together an escape plan. "Once you're dead, the cycle is complete. Maybe when you're stuck here, you'll understand why I'm doing this." "What do you mean, stuck here?" I whispered, stalling for time. He paused, eyeing me, sizing me up. I stared at him wide-eyed, waiting for his strike. "You can't leave till you kill. You can't leave until someone pays the price." The weight of the situation finally settled. If I died by his hands, I would never leave these tunnels. I would become a monster like him, chained to these rails until I sacrificed 3 people for freedom. He lunged for me, a terrible shriek coupled with a horrid stench emanating from his mouth, which quadrupled in size. An empty hole disguised for a throat and wide enough to fit my entire body in it came into focus. My fist moved forward with the stone still clenched in my hand. I struck out hard, with fear acting as my fuel. The rock struck the creature's eye, ripping a growl from his throat. I pushed off the tree trunk and ran. I felt his claws struggle to hold onto my hair as I lunged for the trees. My heart was in my throat and my legs moved fast, despite the ache in my thigh. I'd escaped the second time. "Run and you die, Maisie!" His shout tore through the cold air. I didn't turn back to check if he was after me. He had said I was his 3rd kill. He had to kill me to be free. My mind struggled to process what I'd heard as I fought low tree branches. Leaves tore at my face. It wasn't real. But those claws and teeth, the woman on the train had those too. Sharp teeth and long claws. Tears rose and my throat clogged with withheld screams when I heard an unmistakable snarl a few feet behind me. It was catching up. These people in the forest, they weren't human. They were evil. Adrenaline kept my legs running, zigzagging through trees. The grasses seemed to give way here. Overhead, the moon came out from dark clouds, illuminating the forest and casting fearful shadows. More than once, I saw crouching figures in the undergrowth, eyes shining bright against the darkness and teeth bared. They didn't attack, only watching me with eyes glowing like coals. I wondered why they didn't attack. But then I remembered the woman on the train, and I knew that this man, the creature, had killed her to claim me as his third victim. "Maisie," the wind whispered. I shook my head wildly, stumbling and catching myself. My thigh burned and my vision swarmed with blood loss. "Diagnosed with severe paranoid schizophrenia, Maisie is very dangerous, ma'am." The memories trickled into my head, and I suddenly remembered why I got on the train in the first place. Today was my mother's death anniversary. That's why she never picked up the phone. Realization slowed me down, sobs tearing at my throat. I couldn't breathe. Dark spots swarmed before my eyes, faces hid in shadows, and their mocking laugh was carried by the cold air. The creature behind me laughed. "You've been marked, Maisie. That wound on your thigh isn't for fancy," he mocked. As I ran, the tears in my eyes started to blur my vision. I was supposed to be at St. Agnes Hospital. I wasn't supposed to be on that train. I really was crazy. What I was seeing really wasn't real. I stopped running. Was I even here in this forest? I stared at my hands, surprised to find them covered in blood. My eyes widened and I stumbled backwards, staring at my hands like a foreign object. Whose blood is this? How did they get here? What have I done? The forest swirled again before my eyes and I shook my head, squeezing my eyes shut. "This isn't real," I mumbled to myself, opening my eyes slowly. Maybe it was a trick of the moonlight, but there was a sudden shadow up ahead. Sudden relief washed over me as I recognized the outline. Even if I was crazy, at least I hadn't hallucinated the man with the cigarette. "Hey!" I screamed on top of my lungs as the cigarette man continued to run. He turned back and screamed in terror, his legs kicking up more dust as he struggled to keep up his pace. Goosebumps covered my arms in seconds as I realized that the creature must have increased its pace. The cigarette guy must have seen him behind me. If I wanted to survive, I needed to start running to catch up. That guy was the only one that could save me now. "Wait for me! Please, please!" I screamed, the pain in my thigh now increasing as I heard snarling from behind, but the man kept on running. Breaths escaped my lungs. I didn't want to die. I remembered everything now, ironically. I'd escaped from St. Agnes Hospital to see my mother's grave, to apologize for pushing her down the stairs 10 years ago. I hadn't meant to. I began to run again, stumbling over branches, suddenly noticing an overhead light coming from the end of the forest. I was gradually catching up to the man even though the pain was becoming excruciating. I raised a hand in desperation as I tried to get his attention. "Please, I'm hurt. Slow down," I screamed, but the more the man looked back, the more terrified he seemed. Suddenly, the dense forest opened up to dry, cold air and I stumbled on the rails in front of me. A few feet ahead, 2 concrete walls majestically stood with Stavenport Station written in bold. I laughed in relief. Somehow I had managed to get through the tunnel, past the forest, and now I was getting close to the train stop. I was so close to Stavenport I could feel it. The trees behind me rustled as something huge rumbled behind me. Terror washed over me again. I still wasn't free. "Help!" I screamed, my legs burning from exhaustion. My voice was barely audible. I was shaking and my sense of balance was off. My leg threatened to give way under me. There was no one around except the man, obviously ignoring my cry of help, sprinting for his life. The rails stretched in front of me, bending at a corner, cutting me off from the train stop. I pushed further. The creature broke through the tree line, looking pissed at my chance of escaping it. "There's no escape for people like you and I. Get to that train station and you'll be shipped back to your mental hospital faster than you can blink," it said, approaching me. "You're not real," I spat, moving further. It laughed, a harsh, forbidden melody that sent chills down my spine. "Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Either way, you die." I craned my neck in time to see the man's outline disappear around the bend. The man had escaped without turning back. "Wait!" I screamed in panic, but hands gripped me by the wrists and spun me around, claws piercing into my flesh painfully. I screamed, flailing in its grip. If I wasn't real, could I have done this? It goaded, twisting further into my arm. I didn't register my own voice shrieking because my ears were ringing with panic and pain. It laughed maniacally. The forest trees wildly rustled as though they were alive, egging the creature on. "Hear that? The forest wants you, Maisie. It welcomes you." I struggled, fighting the nausea rising in my gut as voices came to me. Kill her. Let her join us. Kill her and be free, brother. The voices weren't just voices now. They were emerging from the darkness, each an abomination to behold. Coal-bright eyes, razor teeth, and empty eyes were all I could make of them. I'd thought they were my imagination, but they were very real. The moonlight cast harsh shadows on the faces of these creatures that were once human men, women, and even children. Each had saliva dripping from their teeth, hunger shining in their soulless eyes. Send her to us, they begged. The creature drew me closer, savoring the horror and fear in my eyes. Still believe we aren't real? Or have we convinced you? I choked when claws sliced through my neck. Hot blood poured through my fingers when they instinctively went to apply pressure to the wound. My eyes widened. I was going to die. Help, I gurgled, unable to do anything but watch the creature stretch a leathery long tongue to lap up my blood. The other creatures from the forest inched closer, hands outstretched towards me. They wanted a share of me but wouldn't interfere. This wasn't their catch. Hungrily, the creature slashed even deeper. My fingers unclenched in shock as more blood pumped from my body, spurting onto my shirt. I couldn't breathe. Close your eyes, Maisie, and it will be over soon. Someone had told me that years ago. Whether it was my mother or a doctor, I couldn't remember. Panic made me unable to close my eyes as blood filled my lungs. I coughed, weakly trying to push the creature off me. Probably satisfied, it let me go and I crashed to the rails, clawing at my neck. My vision swarmed and the night sky suddenly looked closer, stars muddling into each other. I fought for breath while watching the creature slink off the rails. Its bones crunched, popped, and cracked. It shrieked terribly, falling to the ground and pawing at its face. The other creatures watched in fascination, with jealousy. Before my very eyes, pale skin began to form, and its long claws retracted with a squelch. Razor teeth disappeared into a familiar face. Its features kept forming with sickening sounds while I watched on, vision slowly blurring but unable to look away. I heard footsteps approaching the rails. "Do you see that? There's someone on the rails!" Someone shouted. I couldn't raise my head. The other creatures blended into the forest line, barely visible. They were waiting. I tried to speak, but ended up coughing blood up. My headache of earlier intensified. "You're almost at the other side, Maisie." The rails beneath me rattled violently. Something heavy was approaching. Something was coming, and it was coming fast. "There's a train coming! Hey, stand up!" People were shouting now. "Did you see that? There's someone in the forest," someone shouted. I hazily remembered who that gruff voice belonged to. It was the cigarette guy. A part of me was relieved he'd come out safe, but the other part of me burned with hatred. If he'd come back for me? "We have to help. There's a train coming, don't be stupid." I finally heard it. A train, honking in the distance. The driver must have seen me lying on the rails and must have thought I wanted to commit suicide. I couldn't move my limbs. I tilted my head to the side to see the creature one last time. My eyes widened as shock rippled through me. No, that couldn't be true. The creature stood to its feet and waved its hands. A familiar voice tore from its throat. "Hey! Over here! Help me, please! I was attacked!" I stared at it, cold terror seizing my last breaths. The creature gave me a sinister smile, one that didn't sit right on the face it had stolen. "Goodbye, Maisie," it said in my own voice. My face stared back at me, eerily smiling. The train gave a last honk. "Welcome, Maisie. Come stay in the dark with us. You're tied here with us." "Maisie," I heard those terrible voices whisper mockingly before my eyes shut. The train and the noises faded into nothing as darkness enveloped me.